Good morning, I'm Jessica Lovell. Today, we bring you an encore presentation of one of our very favorite programs. Our team is working hard behind the scenes to bring you more amazing stories when our live programming returns in September. If there is an urgent update from the health system, of course, we will be here to let you know first. Until then, please enjoy this encore presentation and make it a great day. Good morning, I'm Jessica Lovell, and welcome to the Morning Medical Update. Most of us, if not all of us, have had a bad fall. Maybe you lost your balance or you tripped. Today's guest hit her head and went weeks with only minor symptoms. Completely unaware, there was a pocket of blood filling a space inside her brain. We're going to hear what symptoms finally caused her to seek help and learn about the procedure that likely saved her life without needing to drill inside her skull. We are so happy to be speaking today with Janet Wisner. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Good.
Good to see you here with us today alongside. Good to have you.
Good to be here.
Yeah, and Dr. Koji Elbersol, always great to have you. You were the surgeon that treated Janet once doctors finally figured out what was going on inside her brain. Dr. Elbersol is the health system's director of endovascular neurosurgery. Always glad to have you reunited with a patient. What's it like to be sitting here with Janet?
Outstanding. This is exactly what we wanted to do.
That's always the good full circle moment when you end up right here on this program and things are going well. Right. So, Janet, before the program started, you gave us details of this fall you had. Give us the details.
Okay, so I was babysitting my daughter's 3 small children, 3, 2, and 1. So I have my hands full. And her oldest daughter, who was 3 at the time, wanted to know if mommy and daddy were coming home, which they were. They were on their way. So we're standing at the front door watching out, you know, like kids do. And I don't remember why, but I turned to go away from the door, and I believe I was on one foot. I'm not sure. But my 95-pound lab came and just took that leg out from underneath me. So both of us, I've got JC here, we go propelling towards in the foyer towards my steps. And the last 2 steps don't have a wall, so they have a sharp corner. And as your brain can think really, really fast in those minutes, I didn't want JC to fall and for me to fall on her. So I kind of torqued my body up, and unfortunately, or fortunately for her, I went into that step like this, just like a, bullet. No hands out, no nothing. The good thing is that she wasn't hurt. I knew I had a really, hard hit. So I had my husband get me an ice pack and a rag because the kids could see the blood. I'd probably hit like a small little artery. And then I was just sitting there. My daughter came. I said, "Do I need stitches?" And she looked at it and she's like, "Mom, it looks like someone's hit you with an ice pick. There's really nothing to stitch." And there used to be an old wife's tale that it's better to come out, the bruising, than go in. I don't know about that, but in my case, that was definitely the case. So she and I were kind of watching me for any signs of, concussion. I had told my husband, if I'm doing this, nothing. It was a little sore, no bruising to speak of.
How are you feeling?
At the time, I felt okay. I really did. I mean, my head kind of hurt, but I had like a minor headache.
But you knew you took a whack.
I knew I had taken a really hard fall.
Dr. Elbersol, what's that old wives' tale about? Is that true? I mean, it's better to have something growing out than building up in.
When we're talking about bleeding, we like to stop bleeding. So how do you stop bleeding? Put pressure.
Okay. So when did this happen, Janet?
So it happened on November 5th. In the middle of the afternoon.
Okay, so you're a nurse also, a trained nurse, which means you may know the signs of a concussion.
I do. My background is neonatal, but I do know I've had a lot of children with sports, and so I do know the signs of concussion.
And you know about the monitoring of those symptoms.
Yes, I was checking my own pupils. My daughter was checking my pupils. Yeah.
Okay, so you're seeing, you know about this fall that's happened, but then we fast forward to December and you're out shopping, some more serious symptoms appear. What made you finally decide to call and get help?
So it was really odd. It was the very first symptom that I can, remember that I had. I got out of my car, downtown Overland Park. I'm going across to get a Christmas present for a party that night. And I start across the street, and all of a sudden, literally, my peripheral vision went, and I thought I was going to have to lay down in the street, which is never a good thing. So I literally put my hand out, and I felt back to my car, I got in my car, I sat for probably 5 minutes, took a drink of water, and then I got up and finished my shopping. It was very, I think that's what was so confusing. My symptoms kept changing and they would go away. And it was almost to the point it made me question myself.
That's tough when they come and
happen?
go, because you're thinking, okay, maybe it was nothing. Do I really want to mess with calling the doctor? But you did. What made you finally call?
I called her and I said, you know, I was getting a little dizzy too, not bad, but a little dizzy. So I called her and I said, you know, I had this episode and I've been a little dizzy. So I went and saw her. First thing she asked me, have you fallen? And what do you think my answer was?
Not recently.
I said, no, it was 5 weeks, before that. So I did. It didn't even come to my thought. And so she treated me for a frontal sinus infection because she thought those can kind of mirror those symptoms. And then Christmas came, and I was just talking to Dr. Ebersol. The thing my kids noticed, they had a lot of fun with it. They thought it was just my aging. I gave the wrong presents to the wrong kids. I mixed things, I'm usually in a big room, I have 17 people, and I just mix things up a little bit.
Leave it to your family to kind of know when something's wrong with the ones they love. But did she do the right thing? I mean, she's noticing different things happening. I know it's tough though when they're changing, and then of course you forget about this fall that happened weeks ago, Dr. Ebersol, but she did finally make it to the doctor.
Right. It's a classic story. It is a slowly developing bleed that slowly presses on the brain, increasing brain dysfunction slowly over time. The symptoms can be subtle, and it's not surprising that family can often be the first ones to pick it up because it can be subtle enough that you don't have enough insight of the changes that are taking place internally. Classic story, but she was watching for all of the right things, but the delay in the response of the body to this event is what can make it missable.
Yeah, that's pretty tricky. So, were you having some issues at work, like typing?
So I was, not in December. Probably that was happening middle of January. There were a couple times I'd get up from my desk. I tend to move fast. I would get up and I would and it was almost like I had to let my brain resettle, kind of stabilize, and then I could walk on. But I was noticing, especially in the end of January, I'm thinking, gosh, maybe I need to retire. This job is getting really hard. I would be typing. I'm a pretty proficient typer. I never look, so I'm typing away, and I'd look up, and I'd have all these misspelled words. And I could use spell check to do it. But what we found out is I hit my head on the left side, so my right arm was hitting, my right fingers were hitting the wrong keys.
And I keep thinking that was the beginning of November, and now we're into January. How did you hook up with this guy?
So the 1st of February, this is when it really got bad. Before that, I had no trouble driving. I'd come to work. My life was harder. I was tired. I had quit doing Pilates, which I love. I had quit bowling. So I was just self-limiting. When I felt the best was when I was laying down, maybe like watching TV, which I'm not a huge TV watcher, but I thank God for Netflix. But the biggest thing was the first week of February, I'm driving down the highway north on I-35, and the road just kind of starts moving. I don't know how to explain it, but almost like you're on a, like a swing bridge going over water. I could tell my world was not stable. And I couldn't remember for sure where I was going. I was going to the plaza, but I'm also on my route to work. So I thought, I need to get off this highway. I'm a pretty fast driver, so I'm in the left-hand lane. So I move over, get to the right-hand lane, I get off on Lamar, and I call my daughter. And I said, something is definitely wrong. We knew, she kept encouraging me to go to the emergency room. And I'm like, no, I'm okay, I'll see Dr. Brocksterman. So she said, Mom, I'm gonna call an ambulance. And I said, no, talk to me. I'm gonna go the side roads and go home. So I did. And the next day, I got in to see Dr. Brocksterman, and again, she asked me, have you fallen? And I said, no. And I told her then, I said, I think I have a brain tumor. There's something wrong. So she ordered a CT scan. And that's when I met Dr. Ebersol. So it was interesting because I had my CT scan at 9 o'clock. And when I walked in, everybody was like, okay, lay here. And then after they did the scan, you know, nurses watch people. They were like, do you need some help? You're not driving, are you? Is there someone in the waiting room for you? And I'm like, yeah. That was 9 o'clock. I was on the phone with my primary care by 9:30, and I was on a televisit, I think, at 10:30 with Dr. Ebersol.
So when did you make the connection, though, that this was this fall? From a couple months ago?
My daughter did. My daughter did. When she knew that when we finally found out what it was after the CT scan, she goes, Mom, I bet it was that fall that you had. And I'm like, oh.
Could
Yeah.
be, could be. So,
Could
Dr.
be.
Ebersol, what was happening? You talk about this slow progressing bleed. What's actually happening, and why was it then leading to each of these individual symptoms along the way?
Right. So the subdural hematoma, that's the type of bleeding that you had, is an accumulation of blood on the surface of the brain. And the brain is soft like jello, so it's somewhat malleable. So as a bleed is expanding, it can push on the brain. It's a low pressure bleed, thought to be from a vein, a low pressure vessel, so it's slowly accumulating. And we already talked about how do you stop bleeding? You put pressure on it. But the brain can't push back because it's soft, so the bleed can win. It keeps slowly expanding. And when it gets to a certain size, it's putting enough pressure on the brain that the symptoms will become obvious and they will become progressive with time.
I want to show some images.
Sure.
Where was Janet's bleed located?
Okay, so see, this is a CAT scan, two different views. One is looking face to face, that's the most leftward image, and the other one is an axial cut, so scanning from top to bottom in the brain. And you don't have to be a brain surgeon to immediately see that there's a difference from the left side versus the right side on this scan. Remember, when we're looking on CAT scans, anatomically we're looking at it backwards. So in fact, that is a large fluid collection on the left side of the brain, importantly pushing on the left side of the brain. That is old blood product that the body is trying to resorb, but it's not able to do it.
And we have another image, I believe. What's this?
This is the blood vessel that seems to be responsible for these bleeds not resolving, progressing over time. Because as the body is trying to heal, part of the healing process is making new tiny blood vessels, and these new tiny blood vessels have fragility to them, and so they're a little bit leaky. And since the brain can't push back, being of a jello consistency, these leaky blood vessels keep expanding the space.
So you get in there and get to work. How did you treat it?
So we applied a procedure that's called middle meningeal artery embolization. It is a non-surgical treatment for this disease process that's newly understood. In fact, it was just a couple of days before I met Janet that there was an international conference that had released the results of 3 worldwide randomized trials that demonstrated this should be part of the new standard of care. But we're KU, we are already up on this. We had been doing it for 5 years at this point, and we already knew what to do for Janet. But what it means is we're going to take a fine catheter about the diameter of an angel hair spaghetti, track it up to the blood vessels of the lining of the brain. These are the ones that make these little friable, fragile vessels that perpetuate the bleeding, and clog them up with little beads that are made out of a similar material to absorbable stitches. By clogging up that blood vessel, the process halts, and then the natural healing processes take place, and the thing will resorb back to nothing.
So you mentioned here at KU, we've been doing this for quite a while already, but let's say you're not here, you're somewhere else. What would the alternative treatment options been?
This is one of the classic neurosurgical problems. If you see pressure on the brain, you want to relieve the pressure. This is old blood products. It is very readily removed through small openings in the skull. Typically, you make 2 openings, and then you can simply irrigate there with saline, and that proteinaceous material will wash out through the other hole. So classic surgery is still an important part of the management of this condition. But this new approach both augments the traditional surgery, it makes it more resilient, and in an important number of patients, we think you can avoid surgery altogether.
Meaning you're not going into the skull.
Exactly.
So were her symptoms of this brain bleed pretty, it seemed like they're kind of all over the map a little bit, but were they typical? I mean, what should we be looking for? When should we make that call?
What I would say is atypical about Janet's otherwise very classic story is Most people with that much pressure on the brain would be experiencing obvious dysfunction. But I think it really speaks to your resilience, your energy level, and your overall health that you were still working, driving to work, doing all of these things. Yes, you realize that you weren't as facile at these things, but it was subtle enough that you were maintaining. That is remarkable. But typically, the symptoms become very clear.
So you bump your head, and she took a whack to the head.
Yeah.
It's scary because we're told things like you hit your head or your kid hits their head, don't lay down and sleep, or stay awake and make sure people around you are paying attention. How do we know a bump on the head is a serious bump on the head?
If you have a bump on the head and you lose consciousness, for example, you should be visiting the emergency room. But Janet's situation, she had an important bump and then an important scalp bleeding. The scalp is very vascular, so you will get a lot of bleeding if you get a cut on the scalp. But she was able to control that, didn't have any loss of consciousness, brain function working just fine. She already knew watching for the signs of concussion, confusion, unexplained headaches, fatigues, memory dysfunction, these types of things, and did not happen in the immediate period. It was only well later that the symptoms started to present, and she had already forgotten about that hit on the head.
Crazy. So Janet, any type of surgery on your head can be a scary process. What were you thinking kind of leading up to this? After you met with Ebersol, he explains it to you, you must have been all in, ready to get better.
I was all in. That's a good terminology. My response was a little different, I think. I was so sure that I had a brain tumor that when my primary care physician told me that I had a subdural bleed, so I knew enough to know that was outside the brain, but I knew where it was. I felt relief. I mean, it was just like, because I knew something was wrong, And so by the time I talked to Dr. Ebersol, I thank you, because, a lot of times I do have some knowledge, but it's neonatal. And so I can ask really silly questions, and never once did I feel talked down to. I felt like twice I've been here to KU. Once I was septic, and this time with a brain bleed. And I knew I was exactly where I needed to be. I knew of Dr. Ebersol, although I had never met him. So I just felt like, I think my family was more worried than I was. I was like, okay, let's get this done. Let's do this.
Let's do it. Yeah, he's good like that, huh? So she mentioned a tumor, because I would be thinking a tumor would cause that type of pressure in the brain too. Would they have similar type of symptoms?
For sure. That absolutely could have been the case. I agree. I'm glad it was a subdural.
So it wasn't a huge leap for her to be thinking something was going on in there.
That was spot on. That's being in healthcare to think of those types of symptoms.
So you shared a photo, 2 thumbs up from the hospital bed. This was what, before the procedure or after?
Before. They'd taken me in.
And so, Dr. Ebersol, what happens to the blood that had already pooled in Janet's head? Did it just immediately go away? I think
not immediately.
I think we have some images and stuff, but
not immediately.
Where does that go?
Okay, so here's the February CAT scan. This is the scan that I first met Janet with, and then we performed the procedure based on this scan. This is it in March, so you can see it's importantly smaller. And then the next scan is April, so now we're essentially 8 weeks from the time that it happened, and it's essentially almost 100% resolved at this point. The body wants to heal this. It's just the balance is tipped in favor of the thing perpetuating. If you can tip the balance into the favor of healing, the body can take it the rest of the way.
So what is the care moving forward? Will she have to see you?
Done. She's done.
Only sees you in the hallways here
She's
at
cleared.
work?
That's
That's
right.
it.
There you go.
Okay, that's good. Be sure to ask your questions. Use the chat on YouTube or Facebook. You can email the Medical News Network. Okay, so Janet, after this MMA procedure, what was recovery like for you? Did you have any
I did. I had a few
issues?
symptoms that I actually called back, and his office was phenomenal. I called several times because I would get like a new symptom, but I think as my brain was re-expanding, like I had a headache that I hadn't had. Not terrible, but I just wanted to make sure that everything was okay. So they were very, they would kind of talk me through it. The biggest thing for me was my fatigue and getting back to life. I felt old for the first time in my life. I know I am old, but I never felt old. And it took me probably 6 months to get back you know, you lose a lot of muscle mass, especially at my age. So trying to get back to life was the worst part of it.
What did you feel immediately? Was there any immediate thing that
No.
you noticed? Everything was a slow
Everything
gain
was
back.
slow.
Yoga,
I did
typing?
notice within 2 weeks my balance was much better.
Okay.
So I think, you know, we didn't talk about this, but I had a shift of the middle of the brain, right? And so I think probably when that got back, my balance, that's me being the neurologist, so my balance came back fairly quickly to the point of walking. I still wasn't, I do reformer Pilates, which is up on a machine. I still was not ready to jump up there.
To do that. And then it just took some time to get back to yours, because you had effects with sleep and reading and, of course, typing, as you had mentioned, but those things started to eventually
They did.
come together.
I think I took 6 weeks off of work just because it was just too hard. If I had to, I could read, but if I was having to read and go into charts and look for information, I would get a little bit of a headache, but mostly just fatigue.
Are you feeling 100%?
I am.
You are?
I am.
Is that
Yeah.
pretty typical, Dr. Ebersol? That's like, you can't get any better than 100%.
It's an outstanding outcome.
Good.
I'm very happy for it.
And traveling. Are you back to traveling?
So we've traveled in the United States. That picture of Italy was actually 3 years ago. My husband and I love to travel. We went to, in April, I went with all my grandkids. So there's 17 of us, my children and their children and my husband and I. So that's the only traveling I've done so far, but next month I'm headed to Florida for a little bit, and then in January I'm headed to the Oyster Festival in North Carolina. So
You're back at
we've
it.
got some things.
You're back at it. Family must have been key to this whole thing. You said your daughter's the one who kind of stayed on you, and then afterwards I'm sure just the support was immense.
She was. I think my boys, they you know, just trusted that everything would go okay. My daughter is a dentist, so she knew a little bit more, and I think she was the one that was worried, and you made her feel much better too. She went with me into the pre-op, or to the pre-post area. So I think she felt like I was in good hands as well. So, you know, it had a great outcome.
Great.
I knew I was exactly where I needed to be. People come here, this is my little spill for KU. People come here because of the advances that we have. So I knew I was in the right place, and that's the best you can hope for. So
that's
I'm
a
a
great
little bit of
feeling.
a control freak, but when I know that I'm in really good hands, I just,
You trust.
I do.
You trust.
I trust.
How often do you perform this, and is it pretty rare in the area?
To be honest, I do not know if the other facilities are performing it, but based on the results of these clinical trials, I hope they are. They need to be offering it to their patients.
You don't want to be the only one, is what you're
That's
saying.
true, because it is technically quite straightforward,
Yeah.
importantly safe, and it absolutely works in a dramatic way.
Let's get to some questions from our viewers this morning. Amy asked, what are the biggest risks if a brain bleed is left untreated? And how long could this have gone on? We're talking a couple of months.
Again, Janet's situation was a little atypical in how well she was able to continue caring about her daily life with the size of this bleed. Most patients with that size of bleed would be obviously weak on the right side of the body and progressively losing independence, so that everybody involved would say this is clearly not right and would be getting her attention. An untreated brain bleed that is progressing, this class of bleed leads to progressive dysfunction. Every day, looking back, you'll feel like you were worse than the day before.
Jeremy has a question. What are the most common reasons you would see someone coming in for a brain bleed? We talk about a big hit on the head. Is there anything else that would cause something like that?
The subdural hematoma, this class of slowly accumulating blood, which unfolds over 4 to 8 weeks, potentially longer, is a very special subset. Most other forms of brain bleeding are a sudden emergency. So two completely different classes. So I don't want to confuse the audience about the nature of brain bleed. This is a very specific, slowly accumulating type that can be hard to make the diagnosis because of its insidious nature. The other form of brain bleeding is an immediate emergency, immediate dysfunction of the brain, 911.
Stuart wants to know, should you ask for a CT if you fall, just to make sure you didn't get seriously hurt?
Right. Well, listen, in in a perfect world, you would have a full body scan anytime there's any question raised. But this is not a reasonable thing to do when you're thinking about resources and the invasiveness of the testing. You have to make clinical judgments about what's the likelihood of that test giving you some valuable information. So if everybody who got a hit on the head had a CAT scan, we would just be applying radiation to the population with no important provable benefit.
Would her, Janet, remembering about this fall and sharing that information sooner, would that have changed anything?
I think probably the doc would say, let's get this CT scan. Yeah.
You would have.
Yeah.
But we were talking before the show, if I had gone to the emergency room when I had this done and had a CT scan, it probably wouldn't have shown.
Yeah,
correct?
I think that's true. I think there's a good chance that they would not have performed the CT scan because, yes, she had a good impact to the head, but she didn't lose consciousness. The brain was functioning perfectly fine. She was herself, but might not have met the criteria to have a CAT scan.
Correct, so because earlier on she wasn't showing
because
that.
it's slowly accumulating, the process that we ended up treating several weeks down the road would definitely not have been evident on that first scan.
And also, Stu wants to know what makes someone a good patient for the procedure that you performed. You talked about before there was a different standard of care. Is pretty much everybody in line for this?
We are
if
offering
possible?
it widely because it treats a problem that otherwise requires a brain surgery operation. If you can spare a patient from that, that's hugely important. So in fact, the number of patients that are candidates for the brain surgery are more carefully selected than the ones that are candidates for the middle meningeal artery embolization. Because for surgery, you've got to be strong enough, resilient enough to make it through an invasive procedure. That applies importantly less to this minimally invasive procedure.
All right, I know, Ebersol, we love it. We love you. We just don't want you cutting into our brain if we don't need it. So.
I agree. I don't want to do that either.
Good. Okay. Amy wants to know, will there be any long-term issues for Janet, or is it just she is good to go? Just no more. Just be careful on the steps.
Good to go.
Good to go. Can't get any better than that. What do you want the big takeaway to be from your story, Janet?
So for me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I didn't know that as you age, you're more likely to have this kind of an injury. So if I had had this when I was 35, it's terrible, but your brain starts to shrink, so there's a little bit of space. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So it's more likely that there's not pressure up against there to stop that bleed. So if I had done this at 35, I might have never had this issue, and I didn't know that. So I think that's really important for our guests to know that, I don't know, is it like after 60, 65?
Yeah, there's not a specific age cutoff, but you're exactly right. What determines the size of your skull? It's the growth of your brain. So when you are developing as a child, the bones of the skull are not yet fused together. And so as the brain is growing, the skull is expanding. And then you reach a mature brain volume, and then the bones fuse. But the reverse happens as you age. We're losing neurons on a daily basis, and the brain is slowly shrinking volume, but the skull stays the same size. It leaves this potential space. This is the mechanism for the brain bleed of this class.
Interesting. That makes sense. What's the big takeaway from your standpoint?
Oh, I'm just so happy that you are doing all these things for our patients again. That's outstanding. And in a lot of ways, everything was just right for you to have the outcome that we would hope for, that we were already well prepared to apply this treatment, had been doing it for years with excellent success. We knew it was the right thing to do even before it was validated in those clinical trials, of which KU was a part of too.
And you gave me the choice.
Yeah.
But I knew that he had more knowledge than I did, so I trusted him, and especially with a minimally invasive procedure, I was like, let's do this.
So glad you're doing well.
Me too.
Thank you for sitting here with us today and sharing your story. Thank you, Dr. Ebersol. Always good to see you.
Subscribe to our Morning Medical Update and Open Mics with Dr. Stites podcast. Now, everywhere podcasts are available.